page 1053, and it's a delightful reading. Luke 19, starting at the first verse. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Let's pray.
But accepting that can be a difficult thing. I would say possibly the most common concern as people consider faith or maybe deliberate the readiness for being baptised is this question of identity. We ask things like, am I really good enough? Am I really accepted? And of course the enemy likes to have a little bit of a probe of that one. He has this strategy to try and make us forget what God has said about us and to get us to evaluate our standing with him on some other kind of criteria. He will say things like, "Look how bad you are doing," or "Look how much scripture that other person knows. They're a real person. You're pretty pathetic, aren't you? That could never be you." Or he puffs us up with pride. "Look how wonderful you are compared to that hopeless specimen over there." But pride comes before a fall, and you end up back at square one. We get tricked. Satan says, "Look at the condition of you. Look at your life. You can never be God's beloved child." But Jesus says, "To all who believe, you are my beloved child. I am well pleased with you. Now, live that way, your new identity." And today we meet this character who has a real identity crisis. And the key thing to read is in that very last verse, really. Oh, this thing's playing up again. Oh, there we are. The summary really of Jesus' ministry. "For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." The lost. Let me acquaint you with Zacchaeus, in case you haven't come across him until this morning. He was a tax collector. They were despised. They were in cahoots with the Roman authorities. The Romans wanted to get their little slice of the sort of tax cake, but beyond that, the tax collectors could charge whatever they wanted, really. So basically, they were these thieving rip-off merchants collaborating with the occupying forces. And Zacchaeus, we see in verse 2, is the chief tax collector. Taxes at the time were collected in 3 places inland: Capernaum, Jericho, and Jerusalem. And Zacchaeus has got one of the big 3, the kingpin of the Jericho tax cartel. Think of Marlon Brando when you're there, Elevated opportunities for extortion. Likely has a history of bankrupting people, ruining lives, taking people's homes, possessions. Why? All for profit. Tricky to think of anyone in a much more unlikely place to be acceptable to God. Yet this story, verse 9, is about salvation coming to this house. But as the account begins, it seems he is looking for something, or more accurately, someone. Verse 3, he wanted to see who Jesus was. So if you can, picture this guy in his little desk, counting up his piles of shekels. News that Jesus is coming to town is spreading. It doesn't really seem like the most likely candidate to be dashing for a viewing. You know, why would he care with all these piles of shekels? And actually, why could it be? It's a good question. Well, perhaps he's heard about his fellow tax collector, Levi or Matthew, who is now a follower of Jesus. Possibly they knew each other in their tax extortion ring. Maybe he was finding his lifestyle, wealthy and privileged as obviously was, unsatisfying. Augustine wrote a lot about this, speaking of, great quote, "a thrusting at my heart, giving me no peace until the eye of my soul could discern you without mistake." Maybe Zacchaeus has a case of this, what we might call a mercy of dissatisfaction. Or maybe he was just fed up of being hated by everyone. Yes, he's got power and wealth, but the relentless contempt of people maybe was tiring, left him feeling desolate and alone. The Jewish missionary even said this, that tax collectors were so loathsome that they should not even be considered people. I mean, that might get to you, mightn't it, if people were talking to you in that sort of way. Well, whatever it was. For Zacchaeus to actually make this journey, it's going to take some courage, he's going to need to encounter some things, and I think that can be helpful for us this morning. Firstly, I think we get to this pride question. He needs to get over pride. Specifically, he needs the courage to climb up this tree that we read about. And the scenario does seem odd, doesn't it? But it has something to say about pride and dignity. In that culture, a wealthy man, a powerful man, a man with social status would behave in a certain way in public. In his determined efforts to see Jesus, they're set to one side. Look at verse 4. Firstly, he runs, and secondly, he climbs up a sycamore tree. Running is not very dignified. A man of status here at this time, they wouldn't sort of dash around in their robe like a man's thing. The guy would have been in some sort of robe effort, so it just doesn't go, does it? It's the equivalent for us seeing a guy in a bespoke suit in London City, sort of dashing really fast. I mean, it just looks a bit odd, doesn't it? It's not. Running is unnatural. Let's be honest. Running is, in my opinion, running is unnatural. We're not designed that way. You may know the quote actually, which says, "Runners run because they enjoy running. Joggers jog because they enjoy cake." I just enjoy cake, so let's see. But worse than that, he climbed up a tree. Now, if you know this Bible story in your mind, maybe you do know it quite well, I don't know. It might be a bit normal. Yeah, we know about this little guy, he's climbing up a tree, it feels normal. But try and strip it backwards, it is a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, kids love climbing trees, don't they? When I was a kid, I loved climbing trees. I mean, now blowing my own trumpet, I was actually very good at climbing trees. I surprise you from that for this, but it's true. I've retired from that now, 40 years ago. But my most recent effort was actually in Ukraine. We were doing what's called the Relentless Project, camp we do over there with children. It was our first year, it was 2010. And when we got to this village that we were doing this camp in, a lady found out we were doing this camp, she was very excited, and she invited us to her garden. She was a fantastic apple tree. She said, "Oh, please take as many apples as you can and give them to the children. You have to go out and get them." I volunteered. I said, "I'll do it. I'll be up that tree and I'll get them." And that year we actually had a team photographer with us, very good photographer, Alex, and he climbed up the tree with me and he took this photo. That was me, up a tree, getting apples. But then, he also took another photo, which was Oksana at the bottom of the tree, looking at me in no uncertain terms, telling me what she thought about me clambering up a tree at my age. And of course she was right, it's not natural, is it? It's not natural. But just imagine in that scenario how the people would have responded to this. They don't like this guy, they hate him in fact. And here is this little bloke, he's running madly, he's clambering up a tree. I guess he would have been laughed at, mocked. You know, for him to climb up that tree took some courage. All pride and dignity will be set to one side, but that was the price he had to pay. He wanted to see Jesus. And we will get to the salvation bit. We've read in the story, we know the end, we know it's coming. Salvation will come to this house. But this is quite an obstacle, don't you think? To get to Jesus, to reach out to him, to try and understand him, to try and follow him, could very well mean that the world around you will ridicule you. You know, not because you climb up a tree, but for other reasons. And we have some pride, don't we? We want people to think well of us. We want people to think that we are compassionate and intelligent and rational people. But maybe they'll say, "Oh, you believe that fairy tale? Oh, come on. You don't seriously believe the creator of the sky, heaven and hell, demons and angels, and some bloke coming back from the dead? Come on, that's just child play." I mean, I don't even know if I can take you seriously on an intellectual level if you believe all that stuff. Zacchaeus had physically climbed a tree, but people will think mentally we are out of our tree. How do you deal with that when your intellectual pride may be being assaulted? But sometimes I think we need to recoup a little bit of that childlike wonder. You know I do. You know, I can be a bit trusty and cynical in the old age. Maybe you feel a bit of that yourself. There's a childlike wonder to some of the things that we read in Scripture. If you tell children it'll be happening out there now, I promise you, you see their faces will light up. I love telling kids stories. I used to tell all my nieces and nephews about a man called Mr. Ben. Not that one from the DVD, this was a different Mr. Ben. And he basically, wherever I was, whether I was in our house or their house, he would be living in various cupboards. And I used to go to these cupboards, "Mr. Ben's in there." And their faces, "So he's in there?" "Yes, he is." And I'll talk to him, "Oh, Mr. Ben, you're right in there." "Oh, yeah, he's in there, he's in there." And these kids' faces would light. I had to retire Mr. Ben, because he gave one of my goddaughter's nightmares. So Mr. Ben is but the faces are amazing. But the difference is, intellectually, the gospel is true. And however old you are, however familiar you are with the claims, it should fill you with childlike wonder over and over. How about this for a quote? The gospel says there is a supernatural world. There is an evil prince and we're under his enchantment, but a hero from another world has broken into this world and redeemed us with his sacrificial love. Wow! We must never lose that wonder of the basic truths of the gospel. We may look crazy to some people, and that pride step may be the thing that you need to navigate today. But be under no illusion. To believe the gospel, you don't have to sort of disconnect your brain like a child and take a wild leap of faith in the dark. A childlike wonder can exist with real intellectual robustness. It was a real privilege for us last year to welcome Professor John Lennox to the church here. Many of you came, I know. Lennox is a professor of science, incredibly large-sized brain, a passionate Christian who argues faith in Jesus from an intellectual and scientific standpoint. It's fascinating. That's not to say that he has proved Christianity in a test tube. I don't really think you can do that. But for those who say there is no intellectual basis, it does rather level the playing field. But I guess for Professor Lennox even, there has been an element of pride to deal with. I'm sure he's had opponents mock him. Maybe some colleagues think, "I just can't take it seriously." The gospel can seem like folly. And when there is that sort of opposition, are we willing, if you like, to climb the tree? And that is the pride question. What about the hypocrisy question? He needs the courage to get over pride and then to get around hypocrisy, the courage, in this instance, to get past this righteous crowd. So we've seen Zacchaeus this morning needed to climb up a tree, to get beyond the crowd. But look at verses 5 to 7, especially verse 7. Let me just read that again. Verse 5. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." This crowd are not only a physical block, but we know nothing about them except that they mutter and grumble. They look down on Zacchaeus as a sinner. They have a pretty elevated opinion of how spiritual they are and deserving of Jesus' time and attention, and that Zacchaeus isn't worthy of being in that mix. And this sort of hypocrisy in the church is for many, I think, the hurdle that they find hard to navigate. People can be looking at church and its record in history, or maybe their particular experience with a particular believer or church, and they'll say, "Look, I can never follow that faith. You know, we're such moralistic and self-righteous and religious people. It's just this massive turn-off." Of course, when we look at Scripture, the fact is that Jesus also is really turned off by that moralistic, self-righteous kind of thing. He's much less likely to be in a comfortable holy huddle and more likely to be with a rotten old tax collector or a prostitute or a sinner. In fact, when he comes face to face with that kind of self-righteousness, he reserved some of his most stinging attacks for those times. I don't know actually how you feel about that. Perhaps as you look at that and see that, it's very stinging to Pharisees and religious ones, and not so much so with those over there. How do you feel about that? Maybe perhaps you think, I would actually prefer it if Jesus was to give some of those sinners a bit more of a wide berth, to be honest with you, and focus more on those who outwardly were morally less corrupt. But here's the heart of Luke's Gospel. It's about salvation. It's about Jesus' mission to seek and save the lost. A mission that the church carries on, or at least should carry on. And we need to take this on because sometimes we can have this sort of subconscious maybe tendency to separate from the world, to give a wide berth, to lose contact maybe with people that Jesus had a particular point of meeting with. I think there are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, maybe there's a desire, and to a degree it's a good one, that we don't want to run the risk of dropping our guard and losing our own moral integrity. But remember, when Jesus healed the leper, unheard of, he was saying, touch an unclean person with leprosy, are you crazy? But it's not Jesus that gets contaminated with leprosy, but the leper that is contaminated with the love of Jesus. It's a lesson for us, I think. Secondly, and much more dangerously, and evident in this crowd, is that ever so subtle feeling of superiority. I'm better than you. Don't quite word it like that. Look at what you're involved in, dear Lee. Now, I'm not perfect, but, in the general vicinity. And what happens here? All love and empathy that we might have for that person is squashed. We forget that that blessing that we have is not because of our stunning moral character, but all by the wonderful grace of God. None of the three that are getting baptised this morning are doing it because of their exquisite, perfect life and morals, but because of the wonderful grace of our righteous God. And my question for you as you look at this scene of Zacchaeus and the tree and the crowd and Jesus is, where do you see yourself? With whom do you naturally find yourself siding? And when Jesus sees him, he says, come on, I've got my eyes on you. Let's go and get something to eat. And when he does that, there's a couple of responses, vastly different ones. Zacchaeus one's in verse 6. Count me in. Something to eat, no problem. I'm absolutely loaded. We can have a feast. He's blown away, isn't he, that Jesus cares, that there's this outpouring of love and grace and mercy even for one such as I. But what about the crowd? Are they saying, praise God, mean, titchy Zacchaeus, he's had an epiphany. Jesus is meeting him now, it's amazing, it's totally unpredictable, it's exciting. I don't think so. They're mumbling and grumbling in verse 7. He doesn't deserve that treatment, does he? All that attention is getting worm. nice person. I debate stones with Jesus, and he doesn't even interested. I had a victorious function, now and night. Not fair. Friends, what is it that will cause you to grumble and feel that Jesus is not really the right approach? Are there people in society, in your road, at your work, in this church, that you secretly think are beyond the pale of God's grace? The things they've done and they continue to do, the choices they've made, they don't deserve God's grace. If you feel like that, like this crowd, you'll lose that ability to empathise. You'll be in danger of forgetting the blessing you've had from God's wonderful grace to you. You'll start to forget that. And if you're Zacchaeus in this image, and you're struggling actually with something that someone has said or done and it's turned you off, persevere. Don't use that as an excuse. Have the courage to get around the hypocrisy, to get through the righteous crowd and see the wonderful message of grace that is there. So you've had to get over pride, around hypocrisy. Now we have to get through change, the courage to actually invite Jesus in. Verse 5 was interesting. Jesus' first reaction to Zacchaeus is, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to stay at your house today. You could argue actually that's a bit pushy. You know, I don't know how you'd feel about that. If I come up to you at the end of the service, say, hi there, nice to meet you. I'm coming to you for lunch today. Let's go. Peter, Elizabeth, come to lunch. Boom. No discussion. It's happening. My imagining, actually, I don't know, some of you might think this or you might not. My imagining in my mind of this episode of Zacchaeus and Jesus, it's sort of like a conversation. It's in a little room and there's a table and they both have a cup of tea. And, you know, Jesus comes out and have a little cup of tea and have a little chat for an hour or two and then off he goes. That's sort of my image in my head. But the language used is suggests not a quick bite, but overnight accommodation. I will stay. I'm coming as a guest. Now remember still, this is not a new convert. This is still a collaborating, hated, thieving tax collector. And Jesus is saying, I come to stay with you. Excuse me everybody, just going off with Zacchaeus. Now that is no small thing. It opens up something about grace that I think is really important, but often missed out and misunderstood. There is an order to grace and its dispensation that is both troubling but quite wonderful. And it's a question of when we are expected to change. I think, we think, it's you change and I'll come to stay. You change, I come to stay. In verse 8, Zacchaeus makes this promise. Amazing one, really. I'm going to give half of his possessions to the poor. He's not demanded to do this. It goes way beyond any requirement that would have been asked of him. But does he do this giving? Does he do that before or after Jesus says, I'm coming to stay? It's after. This is not Zacchaeus hanging out of this tree and saying, Jesus, I feel great, I'm going to change, I'm going to give half my stuff away, and then Jesus saying, oh wow, I'm so impressed, in that case I'll come and stay with you. No. Jesus knows about his situation, his dealings, but he still says, I'll come to stay. The order of amazing grace is, I'll come and you will change. Friends, when Jesus comes into your life, he grips you. You do not stay the same. It's an experience that changes Zacchaeus. Every other religion has a version of, if you change, then you can find God. If you change, you can find acceptance and salvation if you're really good. But the gospel is opposite to this religion. He says salvation has come to you. You didn't go out and find it or earn it. And sadly, that isn't always the message that people hear. Or even more sadly, it's not always the message that is preached. And it is missed. it leaves people with that identity question that we began with, asking, am I really good enough? Is it really possible that I could be accepted? A load of laws, frankly, just makes a load of Pharisees. Of course, obedience is a key part of the Christian life, but those requirements will never be the thing that transforms you. The transformational power of the gospel brings change. It's not by being told what we need to do for God, but by hearing what he has done for us. Friends, is Jesus saying to you this morning, I want to come into your life as you are. Nothing frightens me. Even that thing, whatever it is that you think forever blocks you from my blessing, I want to come in. But when he does, and that can happen today, there will be a change, gradual. When God's grace is bestowed on you, you will change. Not, I will change, and that will get me the love and grace. But the love and grace has been given, so now I want to change. Zacchaeus makes this huge change in his life. Salvation has come to this house. So friends, are you trying, when you think about it, to earn salvation in some way? What you give, what you do, how you behave. Let me tell you, it will never work. It will never work. But when salvation comes freely by grace, to the most undeserving of cases, you change, you respond. And that is the lesson from Jesus, who is the true man at the top of the tree. We need to get over pride, around hypocrisy, through change. He says to each, come, I will dine with you. I've sought you out, I'm seeking you. I'm the Son of Man. Without me, you're lost. Separated from God's wonderful presence eternally. But I love you. And to prove it, I died for you. Zacchaeus was up on the top of that tree because people hated him. A little while later, Jesus would be hung on a tree, also hated. But because of that, he could say to Zacchaeus and to us, come down from that place of brokenness and shame, take a place of honour, and I'll take your place on the tree. Friends, that should solve our identity issue. As we consider it, we stand amazed. We stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene and wonder, how could he love me, a sinner condemned, unclean? If he knew my heart, if he knew me, well, he did, and he does. And he says, come to me. Oh, how wonderful. Oh, how marvellous. Will we come? Will you come? Well, let's sing. And then let's get wet. I'm going to pray first.